So, Lewis, thank you for joining me on this Friday afternoon. I just want to quickly ask you a couple questions. Some more. First of all, the thing I'd like to ask you is, how did you get started in your journey with unboxing media?
So for me, it started off pretty similar to how you started it. Started off just doing it off my own back. A funny thing, I think my first ever interview was actually on Instagram Live with British welterweight prospect Michael McKinson. And then from there, really, it just started off sort of doing a few Instagram lives with like joint ones. I think I've done one with Troy Williamson, a couple other guys. Then I remember I had a big Zoom interview with Regis Prograis. That was like one of my sixth or seventh interviews. And from there, then you get invited to the press conferences. You go to the press conferences, and through there, networking really, getting to know sort of all the guys, I suppose, around sort of top channels and that. And before I even was working in boxing, I was good mates with Charlie. So from there, I've always got I've got that instant link straight away, and sort of almost instant door, I guess. So yeah, there was always that, and then sort of just through there, really. Then through just building contacts, building names, building relationships with different people. From then on, you get to a position that I'm in now. So yeah, that's more or less it. If that answers the question.
And then, I guess suppose the next thing I'd like to ask is, what has been the biggest, like, what's been the biggest, like, key moment within your journey so far that you believe, like, has helped you get to where you are now? Because everyone kind of has that standout moment that
Yeah,
pushes them in that direction where they just keep progressing off that. What would you say that moment was for yourself?
I think like it's for me like obviously going full doing it full time was a massive key moment for me. But I think like if you look at it like the first one that would spring to mind would be like being on the red carpet for Creed 3 and interviewing Michael B. Jordan don't really get much bigger than that. Do you know what I mean? Like that's something that's quite hard to top. Going to Saudi for Fury and Ngannou, doing my first big American show this weekend, just gone in Haney Garcia. So, these are all moments that are like top of the mountain kind of stuff and things that are big moments for myself. I think, I was still very new when I interviewed Michael B. Jordan, all that happening. So I think I'd probably say that moment would really be the big one for myself.
And how important would you say social media has been along that journey, especially in this new day and age? I'd say, I guess, in the digital era, how important has social media been on your journey?
Yeah, like it's important. Do you know what I mean? I'll be honest, I've neglected it at times. But that's where like most people would get the message out there, and most people, if you're posting clips, posting what you're doing, that gets interest from people. So I think it's important in that aspect to like almost notify people of what you're doing. If you're doing something well, letting people know that you're doing something well is the important thing because then that gets more people attention on yourself. Yeah, like I'll be honest, I've neglected it at times where I've like not really been too interested in doing it, focusing on interviews. But you have to realize that you know what, it's important to do that as well.
What was it that made you want to neglect it? Was it more just obviously because social media can always be a bit of a, sometimes it can be your best friend and
What?
sometimes it can be your worst enemy. But what
Like
was it
I'll
that
be
made
honest,
you neglect it?
for me it was like more laziness, I guess. Like for me, like not really like overly being sort of committed or having like a strategy of what I wanted to do. Like multiple things out really, like, nothing necessarily of like I'm not choosing to do it. I don't want to do it. It was more like almost like I'll be honest, like being brutally honest, it's probably laziness on my part.
And then I'd say, I
Uh,
guess the last thing I'd like to ask you is, if you could give one piece of advice, especially like what you've done with me over the last year or so, giving me
yeah.
advice. If you could give one piece of advice out there to people, what would that be?
Like it's the forming relationships is the most key thing that you can do. So, for me, like, going to gyms and sort of getting used to people there, like getting people outside of almost like a press setting has always been the key thing for myself. Like when you've got actually someone sitting down with someone one on one, I'll go down to Mark Tibbs's gym and I'll be there for, 4 or 5 hours. I'm chatting to them about all different things. All those stuff are so key to gaining relationships. And I suppose when you gain relationships, you then gain trust on people. Like people will come to you if they want something to say, they'll go to you as their outlet to speak to it. And then, yeah, man, that's always been the key thing for myself, I'd definitely say.
Lewis, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I'm here with Josh Hart. Josh, how are you?
I'm doing well, mate. I'm doing very well, thank you. How about yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. First of all, I just wanted to talk to you about what it is that you actually do.
So I'm a reporter and editor for one of the biggest boxing companies in the world called Seconds Out. We've been the leading boxing entertainment provider since 1999. I've only been hired this year. But so I travel the country interviewing various names within boxing, or I can do it from home over a Zoom call. I also edit some of the biggest pieces of work that we've produced so far, especially on a week like this as of recording. Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk, it's the biggest fight we've had this year. And I'm assisting the guys in Saudi at the moment by editing all the content that they get and uploading it from home instead of them doing it because they've not got great service. So I've been in this role now for about 2 months. And yeah.
Yeah. So I assume Seconds Out is that's the logo behind you.
Yeah, the logo behind just there, that's Seconds Out.
Yeah.
There's a great company. We're up there as one of the leading providers, like I said. And I'm very, very honoured to have been given a job with them.
Good. So what was it that first got you into boxing?
I think I was about 12 years old, and my uncle had a charity fight, and then from there I kind of watched the fight, but it was one of those ones where you had to be over 18 to go. So I sat at home and watched it because my mum FaceTimed me, and I kind of saw it all, and I was kind of like, oh, this looks quite cool. So I started training myself, and I was loving the training, and I started watching it more at home, and it was just one big spiral that has turned me into, I guess you could say, just a bit of a nerd when it comes to boxing. But has also then given me some of the best memories I've probably got in my life with me being such a big fan. I remember I started watching it on my own. Normally I'd sit down and watch the big fights with my dad, but then it got to a point where any time there was boxing on, even on like a Tuesday night, I'd be watching it. It didn't matter who was fighting. I was just hooked with the sport, and I've kind of just had that connection to the sport ever since then.
So would you say that you are an aspiring boxer yourself?
At the start, yeah. I wanted to try and go pro, or at least compete at a high level. But just as I got started properly and was getting into a position where I was going to be able to compete, COVID struck, we got hit in lockdown, and the club I was at didn't actually reopen for about 2 years because we had coaches get affected badly by COVID. So I started boxing at 13, but I didn't actually go back until I was about 15. And then by that point, when I went back, I was obviously getting ready for my GCSEs. It was just a bit of a stressful time.
Yeah.
So I kind of sacked off boxing for a little bit with the intentions of going back. But then I kind of went back and didn't really know what I wanted to do and didn't really have that same enjoyment for the sport itself anymore. I still loved watching it, but actually taking part, I kind of lost that spark.
Yeah. So at what point then did you decide to switch over to boxing media?
It was, so again, during that period where I was preparing for my GCSEs, my English teacher, shout out Miss Wright, she would always read my work, and whenever we got told to do creative writing, I'd write about boxing, because the way I see it all in my head is if you're given the freedom to write about what you want, or just produce a good piece of work about something you get to choose, do it about something that you know and that you know you can go into good detail about, because there's a lot more to produce, I guess you could say. So I always write pieces about boxing, like any fight that I'd watch, any big, like, good fight that had either controversy or was just a great fight, I'd write about in a creative writing lesson. And she kept me back after lunch one time, and I thought she was about to say I've done some piece of work horrifically wrong and I need to stay back and do it, but she was like, I've been reading all your boxing work, and I think it's really, really good. Have you ever thought about possibly going to like sports journalism or something, or like being a sports writer? And I was kind of like, oh no, not really. Like I was planning on leaving year 11 and going to being like an apprentice plumber or something. But she said that, and it kind of pushed me on a different path where I could still fulfill that dream that I have of wanting to have boxing as part of my life, as you know, as what will help me provide for my family in the years to come. And then from there, obviously, I went on to college. I'm doing a journalism course as we speak. And then I started pushing my own channel out there, and it's led us to present day where I'm here now. I'm an employed full-time boxing reporter, living the dream, you could say. And yeah, I don't think if it was for that moment in year 11 where my teacher sat me down and said, you know, you've got genuine potential here, I don't think I would have ended up on this path. I think I would be on a building site somewhere or in someone's house fixing the sink or something, but instead I'm getting to do what I love and get paid for it.
Right. So at what point during this timeline did you consider yourself a legitimate reporter?
Probably, I don't know, there's 2 points. I guess the first point was when I was going to these big fight weeks, so like, not like the biggest of the big ones, like the one we've got out in Saudi Arabia this week, but like when we'd have a big UK show, I was always getting given good access, no matter, like, even though I was running my own channel with 500 odd subscribers and I was competing with people
who had 800, 9,000 subscribers. I was able to compete with them. You know, they would send 3 different reporters because these big outlets, they have multiple people working for them, whereas I was a one-man team. I was arranging everything myself. I was editing, I was doing it all on my own. And I was going to these events and I was leaving with the exact same content as them, if not more. I was sometimes, not all the time, but on the odd occasion, I'd be able to rival them for views. And I kind of started to think, okay, like, you know, I'm actually getting a bit of traction here. You know, people are watching my stuff. I'm going to events, there's boxers I've been watching on telly for years who I've then gone to ask for an interview and they've gone that they've seen me on Twitter or something. I'm kind of like, right, okay, I'm making the right steps. But I'd say I fully consider myself as a legit reporter when I got told that I've been given the job that I'd applied for with Seconds Out, because by that point, it's not just a side hobby anymore where I'm having to work at McDonald's to fund my travel to go to Manchester, London, etc. I'm now not at Mackey's, first of all, because it's my full-time job. I'm getting paid to do this. They're covering all my expenses, whether it's food, travel, anything. They're getting me new equipment. But at this point now, I would say I'm a legit reporter, but there's still so much for me to do. Obviously, I'm only 18. It's almost unheard of for someone as young as me to get a job in a position like this. So while I'd say I'm at that legit level, I still feel like there's definitely a lot more to come from me.
Yeah. What would you say has been the toughest part of your journey so far to get to Seconds Out?
I'd say the financing and trying to fund my own travel, because there's only so much I can do, because obviously I'm trying to balance college along with weekly driving lessons. I know it doesn't take up the most time, but it still eats away. I could go to work for the morning, but I've got to wait because I've got to go have a driving lesson. And just all the funding and everything, it was hard. You know, there'd be some days where I'd go to college like 9 till 12, and then I'd be straight off to work an 8 or 9 hour shift. And it was just do that on repeat, and then whenever I was going away, I'd book the time off. I'd take the time out of college, because obviously I had great teachers who were understanding and can see that I'm taking the skills that I've learned in the lesson into the real world now and creating my own path. So I guess when I started to get busier and I was getting more access to more shows, it got to a point where I would be on the road constantly for 6 or 7 weeks, just going from Nottingham to somewhere else and back to Nottingham in the same day. And I would do that 3 or 4 times a week, 3 or 4 days a week, but over a 6-7 week period. So I'd be on the train about 20, 30 times pretty much over those 6-7 weeks. And because I was travelling more and I was still trying to balance it with college and other things, it reduced the amount of time I could give at McDonald's and work, because I wouldn't be able to go back into work straight away the next day because I'd be travelling back from somewhere still. So when it got to, I'd say about January this year, it got to a point where I was really having to start to rethink how I'm going to approach doing this, because I had near enough no money. I wasn't getting hours at Mackey's even when I hadn't requested time off, because they just got used to that pattern of only giving me 1 shift a week, and by that point they filled the shifts that I would have normally done. So it's not like I can just walk back in and go, okay, give me my usual hours now, because it's not how it works. And then I started looking at other places. I was talking to one of my mates who works at Greggs, saying, can I come join you, because I'm having no luck with my boxing, you know. I've not got the money to travel, so could I just come work with you while I rebuild my money? And then the next day, I got the text that I'd worked for I got the job for Seconds Out, and it was kind of a bit like, at the point where I thought I was going to have to reapproach and possibly stop it for a little bit. The biggest blessing then came upon me, and the people who hired me had looked over my work, looked over what I'd done, looked over my CV, and they said I was the best applicant by a mile. They said I had more work to show than anyone. I had to pick out 4 videos from the 300 that I'd produced and cut them down into 30-second clips showing my best bits. And I sent them that, and I knew I had so much more to show. And it kind of was a massive relief, especially when we're looking back at saying I was struggling with the money and I wasn't able to travel as much. Getting that, it really re-motivated me to get back, because I was at the point where I was like, right, I'm going to have to just stop now. And now, thankfully, I'm in a place now where I don't have to worry about the money, because it's all covered for me. And I know if I have to book anything myself, I'll get it all back in my next paycheck. So we're in a much better place now than I'd say what we were about 2-3 months ago.
Was it difficult balancing college and work and your dream of being a boxing reporter all at the same time?
Yeah, overall, yes. It wasn't a struggle balancing it with college because the teachers were, they were letting me take time out. They were letting me go away. They were letting me go everywhere, as long as I was coming back with some sort of evidence of what I'd done. It was just the balancing it with work and obviously also trying to cram in the driving lessons as well. The amount of times I'd have to message my instructor like a day before my lesson saying, I'm really sorry, but something's come up, because the boxing industry is so last minute. Nothing ever gets done on time. I think the most recent example, pardon me, I'll cut that bit out. So I'd say the most recent example of like nothing being on time, this was only a couple of weeks ago. So this is when I just started with Seconds Out. And basically I got told, I started at the beginning of April and I wasn't going to travel until the end of April. So I was like, cool, I've got 3 weeks just to get myself settled down. 2 days into the job, I get a phone call from my boss. He was out in Spain at the time. And he goes, I'm sure you've seen the news about the Tyson Fury press conference that they've just announced for 2 days' time. Originally, we were meant to have my colleague Eamon. He was meant to go to an event in Manchester, but because Eamon's our most experienced reporter, he's one of the best in the industry. They sent him to Morecambe, and we didn't have anyone else available to go to Manchester apart from me. So on 2 days' notice, I've had to cancel my plans, cancel everything I had planned to do, and get myself to Manchester I hadn't interviewed anyone in about a month and a half at this point, and it was a very big event. And then on the day of the event, some really big news broke that morning while I was literally on the train to Manchester. So I had all my questions wrote down, and then I had to reword them all because a big new topic had just broke, and I was kind of like, right, I can't just miss out on this because it's different now. When I was doing it myself, I would ask what I wanted to. If there was like a big topic I didn't want to talk about, I wouldn't talk about it because I had that freedom to do what I wanted. But now that I'm working for people, there's the expectation of providing a certain amount of content, whether that's the length of the video, what they want, or certain questions being asked. So I was kind of like, right, I'm going to have to just quickly rethink these questions. And these questions took me an hour to prepare. And I was 20 minutes away from getting off the train. So I was like, right, I've got nowhere near enough time to get these done properly. But thankfully, I got it all done. And then I went to the event and absolutely smashed it. But going back to the original point, the balancing was tricky, especially when it comes, obviously, it wasn't like I was just working for the sake of working. I had a backup pot of money. When that backup pot of money that I did have ran out, it was kind of like, oh, we're a bit stuck here. We need to do something, whether that was going to my mum and asking her if she could just book my trains for me, or like just trying to find any time I could work. Literally just any time I could work, I would be taking extra shifts no matter what, even if it was one where I'd finish close to midnight, I'd still take it. If it was a 6 o'clock in the morning start and I had the time, I'd take it because I needed the money. I wouldn't have been able to fund my dream if I didn't have the money. But I think that's taught me a lot about resilience and stuff, and especially now that I did get the job with Seconds Out, it was almost like at the point where I was about to give up, or not give up, but slow down with I'd made so much progress in a small time. In like a year space, I'd interviewed some of the biggest names in the sport. And I wasn't necessarily throwing it all away, but it was kind of like taking a massive break, losing all the traction that I gained and then restarting. It's always hard to rebuild that traction that you once had. But thankfully, like I've said multiple times now, I got the job and I don't have to worry about doing all that balancing now. I've just got to balance this job with college. And again, it's pretty simple to do. I've got great teachers who understand and do not mind if I'm having to take time away because they know I'm doing it for a good reason. It's not like I'm just going away just to sit at home and do nothing. I'm taking the time out to go to a big event somewhere. Like next week, I'm off to Leeds for the biggest fight we've had in the British scene all year, and I've been given the privilege to be out there in Leeds the whole week, covering the Wednesday to fight night. And obviously that covers all the days I'm at college. But I spoke to my teacher, and he said he's completely fine with that because it's my career now, and without the course, I wouldn't have been able to get into this position. So while it was tough balancing it, I am thankful for everything that has happened because it's put me to where I am now.
Right. So what advice would you give for any aspiring reporters who want to get into the same kind of position as yourself?
Ooh, I've got quite a few points here to make. I'd say first of all, stay consistent. Even if there's days, let's say before I started travelling, I was doing Zoom interviews all the time. If there's days where people aren't replying, just keep hassling them. And whether it's the same person or you go find different people, and don't just try interview big names, interview anyone. because you're at that stage where you're just trying to prove yourself. And if anything, it probably takes more skill, and it probably takes more knowledge to interview a smaller boxer who's not really boxed on television before and doesn't have a big deal signed with, you know, Sky Sports, Frank Warren at Queensbury or Eddie Hearn. You've got to be a very elite level fighter to get a deal with them. So I just interview anyone that's willing to give you some time, whether that's 2 minutes or 20 minutes, take it, because it's all valuable experience for yourself, especially if you're just starting out. Use social media heavily. Make sure you're very prominent and active in social media, not even just networking with fighters, but one thing that I did that ended up being really good for me, obviously it was all well and good me having the knowledge and having the ability, but it was approaching reporters who were, at the time, obviously I'm in their same position now where I'm working in this industry full time, but at the time when I first started, I was just a little kid, 16 years old, working at McDonald's. But I started reaching out to all these guys saying like, what helps you get to where you are now? Like, have you got any advice for me? And then they'd give me advice and I'd keep in touch with them, and then they'd start seeing me at shows, and then they'd be watching my content and seeing how well I was doing. And I think that's probably what helped me get to where I am now, because word gets about. Thankfully for me, the only time word has got about me is it's only good. But if you make the wrong move in boxing, you do something that's not very well, or you boast about yourself, like let's say there's some people out there probably, not anyone that I've encountered, but there'll be some people who go into events and they'll be absolute arseholes to you. They'll push in the line, 'cause normally you form a line for the interview, you know, and it's kind of whoever gets there first gets the interview. There'll be some people who will just hop in, and because they're a big outlet, they will get priority, or they'll think they get priority. But there's also other people who probably think they're really good at interviewing, and because they just don't leave people only. And so sometimes, while I say hustle and stay persistent and keep hassling people, it does get to a point where you kind of need to stop before it looks weird. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with messaging them once every few days, but you'll have some people who will be ringing the same bloke 4 or 5 times within an hour if he's 20 minutes late. And it's like, anything can happen in life. There might be something that delays you by just a couple minutes, but some people will just keep on them. So I'd say when it comes to networking with people, both if you're in person and you're networking, be friendly. Don't think yourself too high-headed, but don't also think of them as too big for you, because we're all human. We're all started in the same place. No one has said, I want to be a boxing reporter and gone and got a big job straight away. We've all got to start somewhere, and everyone started out in the same position that I started out in, and that many other people have started out in, and what many people are going to start out in. So be friendly and respectful to people in person, and just treat everyone the way you would in person. You know, I've not walked in here today and started trying to claim I'm better than you. We've come in, we've had a good talk. I'm not big-headed about it, because I know I'm young and I know I'm still learning, and everyone's still learning. No one's the complete reporter. Everyone's got their own strengths, everyone's got their own weakness, but that's what makes us all unique and why people enjoy watching certain interviews, because everyone's got their own style. And then social media, again, reach out to as many people as possible for advice, because that worked massively for me, reaching out to people and just being friendly with them. But don't put too much into the text message that you're sending to them either. Just be like, explain a little bit about yourself and just say, you know, you've seen their content, you know who they work for, and just say, have they got any advice? And 9 times out of 10, they'll reply. Every single reporter I messaged about for advice were messaging me back within a couple of minutes, giving me advice. And it got to a point, because I'd messaged quite a few of them, and once you start getting into the industry properly, you form a new group of friends. Like, you become mates with these people because you're seeing the same people, you know, every other week at this point. And again, the word got about, and people started, you know, talking to their mates about me, because I'd messaged them. And then you'd have them, you know, they'd follow me on Twitter or something, and then they'd message me just saying, just want to let you know, I've heard about your story and your journey. I want to say keep it up, and I'm sure it'll all pay off in the long run. And then those same people that were messaging me that in March 2023 were then reaching back out to me in March 2024 saying, we all said to you that it would pay off, and it has, well done, because that's when I got the job. I'd also say, like I said, when there's days that are slow and people aren't replying, don't lose hope, because every day provides a new opportunity within boxing because something new comes out every day. And even if you're not getting interviews, one thing that I used to do that worked really well in terms of if you wanted to build up your channel views and just get yourself out there, I would literally sit down, hit record on my laptop, and I'll just talk about boxing. I'll do like my own little mini podcast essentially. I wouldn't be sat there with anybody, and I would just go through different topics in boxing and give my thoughts on them. Sometimes it could have possibly got me into a little bit of trouble because within boxing now, because I'm a reporter and I'm there to get answers from people, I need to remain neutral. And I'd be sat on my YouTube channel going, I think this guy's awful, I think this guy's going to get beat by this guy. And it gets to a point where it's like, you know, I needed to calm down. And I had someone message me and say, like, don't get me wrong, what you're doing is good, but just try not to seem like you're just, you know, favouring one person, try and remain as neutral as possible. And it's all bits of advice that you come on board. So when these people are giving you advice, take it on board. Even if someone who you don't know but works in the industry has come over to you and like start talking to you, and they start giving you advice, take it all on board because these people are probably in a better position than what I was in. And if you're starting out, they'll be in a better position than what you're in. And also take opportunities with other people. I got offered freelancing opportunities for other companies. And while it wasn't what I wanted, because I wanted originally I wanted just to build my own platform and become my own brand. But I got offered freelance opportunities to go to big televised shows as a reporter, and they were covering all my expenses for me and whatnot. And at the time, it was a great opportunity because I'd never covered a televised show before. So I got given a text from one of these lads that I somewhat knew, and he said, would you be okay to go to Birmingham for us to cover a fight week out there on Sky? And I said, are you joking? Like, are you serious? Are you actually willing to let me go? Because by this point, I was only a month or two into my journey, and I was not the best reporter. I was nervous. I was speaking way too quick. And overall, I wasn't great. I really was not great. But they were like, no, we've seen your stuff and you look good. Like, you know what you're talking about. And I was like, right, I'll do it then. And I went down. I think that was the biggest opportunity for me because people heard about me then. Because it's not just me being out there on Twitter now. People are seeing my face. You know, they're seeing me in person. They're seeing that I'm serious about it. And then it all spirals on from there. If you take that one opportunity, the opportunities for yourself will pop up because people will see you. Or opportunities for even bigger companies will pop up, and that's what's happened to me. I started off on one company, went back to my own platform and built that to as big as what I could have, and then obviously got the opportunity with Seconds Out, and it's all just gone from there. And also when you're starting out, cover local shows. There's always boxing on within your city, even if it's at a leisure centre or like a little hotel dining room. There's always some form of boxing on nearby. Go to those shows because it shows that you're serious about it. Because if you walked into boxing and tried to go straight to the big shows, people would probably just say, you're in it for the money, you probably don't really care about this sport. But I started off, literally the first show I covered was at Harvey Haddon Leisure Centre, which is a 10-minute walk from my house. I used to have swimming lessons there, and fast forward a couple of years, I was in that same building interviewing people. While it was nothing to most people, and at the time when I first started, you know, there were people that I knew, or people that knew of me that I probably used to know from school who were probably saying like, it's a bit cringe what he's doing, you know, people just sort of starting your own YouTube channel. And I was kind of like, cool, people can say this type of stuff, but in the long run, we'll see who has the last laugh. In my yearbook that I wrote when I left year 11, I put in 10 years, I'll be a boxing reporter. It's come up to 2 years since I left school and I'm already in that position. I've got 8 years still to go and keep proving them people wrong. But yeah, I'd say those are the best bits of advice I've got. Just stay consistent, network, use social media as your best friend. That's what I did. I was so active on Twitter and Instagram, and I still am now. And they've been my best friends, you know. I've been on them every day, pretty much every hour, whether it's messaging people, interacting with people's tweets, hopping on little talk shows on Twitter Spaces with people, just anything that's going to get you out there, and you know you're networking with the right people. All those tips I've just given, they can take you a long way, because what I've just said there, it's not me just chatting for the sake of it. It's stuff that I've done on my journey. It's stuff that I've used to get me to where I am now. And it's stuff that's proven to work. It's all just about the way you approach it. I can tell you these tips. I know I said it's going to work, but it comes down to yourself and how you approach these situations as well. But like I said, be yourself, be confident, be respectful, and all of those will take you a long way.
Right. I thought that was really insightful, Josh. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Ezzy, thank you very much for your time today. Before we fully dive into things, just talk to me about yourself and what you do.
So my name is Ezzy, and I run a channel called Ezzy Talk Sports, where I mainly focus on boxing. I go to events and I do interviews with fighters on fight week, and obviously the fighters after the fight on fight night, people in the crowd, and I also try and dabble a little bit in other sports, but it's mainly focused on boxing, to be honest.
Okay, so obviously you mentioned wanting to dibble dabble in other sports. We'll start off by talking about obviously wanting to get involved in multiple sports, because I think one big thing that I've noticed over my time of studying journalism and particularly focusing on sports is the accessibility, and especially when you look at something like football where players are media trained all the way down to the lowest levels of the sport, and boxing where it's such an accessible sport. Just talk to me about some of the, I guess you could say, difficulties you've had while trying to focus on other sports as well.
Well, yeah, definitely. I think I agree with that. It's a lot harder to, number one, get hold of footballers compared if we talk about football compared to boxers. Like when I think of the footballers that I've interviewed, it's only really like once they've retired and they don't necessarily have those obligations where they're more willing to do interviews and like trying to reach out to football clubs or companies that work with footballers. It's a lot harder to get a response and stuff because for like the show media trainers, they're not used to having that interaction with media. It's a lot harder. Same thing with I've tried it with tennis as well. I feel like with boxing, something that's very good is the boxers got a very good connection with the fans and the fighters, whereas other sports is not the same.
And then just very quickly, just take me back to the beginning of your journey. What was it that made you want to get started with Ezzy Talk Sports?
Well, so I think I wanted to do law, but then I just thought if I were to do law, I would earn a lot of money. But like I don't really want to be reading books all 24/7. So I thought, what do I love doing? And I just love watching football, love watching boxing. So I just thought, how can I try make a living out of this? And I just thought, start my channel. This might as well just see where it can go and doing well so far. Nowhere near finished, but see where it can take me.
And just talk to me about, I guess I want to say the biggest moments of your journey so far, because obviously someone like me who's been seeing you grow from the
Mm.
start, I already know some of the things that you're going to talk about here, but I just want to I want to allow you to push your journey even further to the people watching this. Just talk to me about some of the biggest things or biggest moments in your journey so far.
Well, the one that sticks out for me most is when I interviewed Anthony Joshua in Saudi. That was because growing up, Anthony Joshua was my favorite, absolute favorite boxer, both being of Nigerian heritage. And the thing that made it even more special is the fact that if you remember during that fight week, he wasn't doing interviews with anybody. Like he had that one obligatory one where he was a bit cold with Def Sani. So I was thinking, oh, like before coming to Saudi, I was really hoping to get it, and then seeing that, I was thinking, oh, it's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna happen. And then to get the chance and get a couple minutes with him, I think that was the pinnacle. I think so far. Other ones, if I'm trying to think,
I think I could probably name
I,
some for you. I think I could name some. I'd say getting Ngannou one-on-one when you got Ngannou at the
oh
age.
yeah, that was good as well. I think I think the first sport event that I worked at properly was Misfits in March 2023. And I remember interviewing Chunks, and I was just thinking, wow, this is so mad. Because I was thinking that's like the biggest guy that I interviewed at the time. It was our first proper event. So they're a few that stick out, to be honest.
And when you look to so when you look back at those times now, obviously I'm sure there's probably been a lot of difficulty along the way as well. But how have you mixed, I guess, the bad with the good to get yourself to where you are now?
What do you mean when you say mix the bad
Is
with
it
the
so
good?
just like so for example, obviously when I was on my own journey as well, I was still on my own journey. While there's all those high moments that make you want to continue, you will have
Oh,
some weeks where there's just nothing going for you and there's like
mm,
want to make content but there's no content to like do. Um,
yeah.
how do you keep yourself committed and stay striving during those tougher times like that?
Because I think what it is like I feel like the most important thing is to have a belief in yourself. Because as you say, there are times where there are nothing, and there's also times where like you just don't. There are things going on, but you don't get the opportunity. So like I remember the Prime card, for example. That was
Yeah.
an absolutely massive fight, and I was like really hoping to get accreditation for it, and I didn't. I remember thinking, oh, like this is so bad. Like I could have got so many interviews, like. But then it's just about believing in yourself. There's still many events to come. If you believe in yourself, you think you're good at what you do, you'll get the opportunities. to but get where you want to be. I think it's just having faith in yourself.
How has social media helped along your journey, especially when I'd say, obviously, I know me and you are both very young people, but if we look back to, let's say, a time 10 years ago when me and you were both still in school, um, sports journalism, boxing media was in nowhere near the position that it's in today. Nowadays, you've got people going in with, like ourselves, we're not qualified journalists,
Mm.
still get to go in there and interview the biggest names of the sport. How would you say social media has helped your journey?
I think social media's helped my journey because it's giving me the platform. Like social media can give anybody a platform. Like you can just pick up your camera, pick up a microphone, and just start. Like whereas in before, you wouldn't have that. You can't just make a TikTok. You can't just make a YouTube video. You have to have, as you say, you have to have those qualifications. I think what it does, it just gives you that gateway. Makes it accessible for everybody. So it gets your foot in the door, I think.
And how important is networking with other people as well? See, me and you have become good friends through networking, but
Mm.
just how important has it been for you along your journey to network with other, not just necessarily other reporters, but just anyone within the scene, because anyone can give you a benefit. So how important has that been for yourself?
I think that's probably one of the most important things as well. I think networking is kind of just like especially with interviews. It's every time you do an interview, it's networking. Like it's how you come across in the interview. Because if you come across well in an interview, the next time you see that person, they're going to want to give you an interview. But if you're asking questions they don't necessarily like, or you come off in a certain way, then they're not going to necessarily want to do one the next time. So I feel like definitely I think a network is probably the most important thing for the longevity and sustainability of interviewing. To be honest, I think it's very important.
And I'd say lastly, if you could give one piece of advice to the people out there watching who want to become someone like yourself, someone who's prominent in the scene, someone who's, you're now mixing it up in other sports. I've seen a couple of the interviews you've been doing with some of these footballers. Just one piece of advice to all these people out there watching.
I would say just find what you want to do, believe in yourself, and just be persistent in going for it. That's what I would say.
I love that. It's probably the best piece of advice I think I've heard so far. Thank you very much for your time. Best of luck with your journey as it just
Thank you.
continues to grow and grow.